You know, we all think we know the humble chocolate bar. It's simple, it's delicious, it's always there for us, right? But what if I told you that behind that shiny foil wrapper, there's a hidden world of incredible science and global agriculture that turns a few basic ingredients into something magical? Let's unwrap that story.
And I mean, have you ever really thought about it? Not just the ingredient list, cocoa, sugar, but the incredible journey each of those things had to take to create that perfect snap, then melt in your mouth experience.
Because you see, that bar in your hand, it's not just a piece of candy, it's a precisely engineered product. Every single ingredient has gone through a massive transformation, and today we're going to follow that journey, all the way from the farm to the factory.
To do that, we're going to deconstruct this little marvel by focusing on what I like to call the chocolate trinity, the three core pillars that really make milk chocolate what it is: cocoa, sugar, and of course, dairy.
So first up, let's talk about the heart and soul of chocolate, cocoa. The story starts with a tree, the Theobroma cacao. But believe me, the journey from a simple bean to a finished chocolate bar is nothing short of astonishing. Just to give you an idea of the odds right from the start, a single cocoa tree, right? It can produce up to 100,000 tiny flowers in a year. But get this, only a tiny, tiny fraction of those will ever actually mature into the cocoa pods we need. We're talking just a handful. And these trees, they're picky. They only grow in a very specific, narrow band around the equator, what people call the cocoa belt. West Africa completely dominates this region. I mean, the Ivory Coast and Ghana alone supply more than half of the entire world's cocoa.
Okay, so once the pods are harvested, this is where the real science kicks in. It's a three-step transformation: harvesting, then fermenting, and finally drying. And each one of these stages is absolutely critical. If you mess up just one of them, you're never going to get that classic chocolate flavor.
Now here's a wild fact for you. Fresh cocoa beans taste nothing like chocolate. No, they're actually bitter, kind of sharp. The magic, the real transformation, happens during fermentation. This process creates what are called flavor precursors. These are the essential chemical building blocks that later on, once they get roasted, will just blossom into that rich, complex flavor that we all know and love.
And this is where tradition literally shapes the taste. Over in West Africa, it's common to do heap fermentation under big banana leaves. But in Asia, they often prefer box fermentation. By turning the beans in boxes, you're introducing more air, which encourages different bacteria to grow. And that can give the final chocolate a more acidic, almost tangy flavor.
All right, let's move on to the second member of our trinity, sugar.
We all think of it as just the sweet stuff, right?
But in chocolate making, its physical form, its shape, is just as important as its taste.
You see, sugar isn't just sugar. It actually exists in two totally different states. The stuff you have in a sugar bowl at home, that's crystalline. It has a really stable, ordered structure. But during the intense milling process of making chocolate, some of that sugar gets shattered into an amorphous state. It's disorganized, kind of like glass. And this unstable form, well, that's the secret weapon.
So why is it a secret weapon? Well, because that unstable, amorphous sugar has a really reactive surface. It basically acts like a flavor sponge. It grabs onto all those amazing aroma molecules that are released from the cocoa during milling, and it locks them into the chocolate. It literally stops the flavor from escaping, which makes the final bar taste so much richer and more intense.
And what about sugar-free chocolate? Well, that often uses sugar alcohols or polyols. But here's the cool part. They don't just differ in how sweet they are. They have this fascinating side effect, a cooling sensation. Take xylitol. It's just as sweet as regular sugar, but it produces a cooling effect in your mouth that's almost 7 times stronger. It's pretty wild. And that brings us to the final member of our trinity: milk. It's what puts the milk in milk chocolate and gives it that signature creamy texture. But you know what? Adding it is one of the biggest challenges a chocolatier has to deal with.
It seems like a pretty simple question, doesn't it? Why not just pour fresh milk into the mix? Well, the answer reveals a fundamental, unbreakable law of the chocolate-making world.
The answer is this number. Fresh milk is about 87% water.
And water is the absolute mortal enemy of melted chocolate. Even one tiny drop will cause the entire mixture to seize up. It instantly turns into this thick, lumpy, completely unusable paste. So for a chocolatier, getting rid of the water isn't just important, it's everything.
And that is exactly why chocolatiers use dried milk powder.
Once all that water is gone, you're left with just the good stuff. The lactose for some sweetness, the milk fat for that smooth texture and flavor, and the proteins that give it that signature creaminess.
But okay, here's where it gets even more precise. Not all milk powder is the same. The way you dry it actually changes the shape of the particles. Roller drying creates these flat, plate-like particles that help the liquid chocolate flow really smoothly. But modern spray drying creates these tiny little spheres, which can actually make the final chocolate thicker. The texture of your chocolate bar is literally decided by the geometry of the milk powder. Isn't that crazy?
So let's zoom out for a second and put all these pieces back together. What have you learned on this little journey from the farm to the foil?
Well, we've seen that every single ingredient is radically transformed. Cocoa beans have to be fermented to even unlock their flavor potential. Sugar has to be physically fractured to become that flavor sponge. And milk has to be totally dehydrated and shaped to give us that perfect creaminess. Nothing is left in its original state.
And it all comes down to this one idea. That simple, everyday pleasure you get from a chocolate bar is anything but simple. It's the end result of an incredibly long and complex chain of chemistry and agriculture, all designed for that one perfect bite.
So the next time you unwrap a chocolate bar and you hear that satisfying snap, just take a moment. Will you be able to taste the West African heat-fermented cocoa, the amorphous sugar sponge, and the roller-dried milk? Will you taste the science?